Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Toilets and Titles. I'm Justin Stevens, and we're back with another off-season breakdown bonus episode. This one, obviously, is the Indianapolis Colts. As you all know, I myself am a big Colts fan, so I look forward to this one every single year. And for the third year in a row, we have my man Cody Felger here. Cody, man, appreciate you coming back on. How's life been treating you? And also, tell everybody where they can find your work.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you having me on. Life's good. I'm trying to think from a year ago. I mean, things are pretty settled. I'm married now, which is definitely cool. So
Nice.
it's been a lot that's happened in the last year or so, but all good things. And so a lot of transition recently in the last year or so. But yeah, overall, I've been very good. And to find my work, you can find me just on social media, on X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it. Or on Instagram or Facebook. You can find me at CP Felger 55 right there. And then also you can find what we do at Bring the Juice, whether that's, on YouTube, whether that's on the podcasting app, wherever you listen to podcasts. You can find us on there pretty easily as well. So that's kind of where you can find me and kind of what we do.
And that one is, if I remember right, at BTJ Pod, right?
Yes. Yep. Correct.
Yeah. And listening to Bring the Juice is how I discovered you a while back. So, again, thank you for coming on. We're going to be talking Colts. We're going to be talking the offseason moves. I kind of want to start with how things kind of went down at the end of the season last year. Obviously, we know we had Anthony Richardson out for the majority of the season early, and Gardner Minshew, who's no longer with us, came in very admirably, almost got us into the playoffs there. But so just based off of what we saw from last season, that quarterback position, I'm going to start with it. It's the biggest, pretty much is the biggest question mark for the Colts. Is AR going to be able to stay healthy? Like, he hasn't legitimately stayed healthy for an entire season since like his sophomore year in high school. Like, it's a very difficult thing to judge. You don't want to predict injuries, but as Colts fans, we need him on the field. Like, I don't know. I guess I'm kind of at a loss for words with this first question because it's all about Anthony Richardson. But do you see him being able to stay healthy?
Oh, man, yeah. I wish I could have a crystal ball and be able to tell you for sure.
Yeah.
But man, I'm hoping that just this last season, kind of helped him wise up a little bit. Just not being able to be out there. I mean, we know how much he loves the game and how much it hurt him to not be able to be out there. And so I'm hoping that kind of was the lesson that he needed a little bit. And obviously sometimes lessons are learned the hard way and they're painful. And this definitely seemed like one of them that was painful for him. But man, I really do hope so, because when he's on the field, there's no question that's the difference in this team, and just what he can provide from a dynamic standpoint, and just a lot of things that, Gardner Minshew, like you said, filled in very admirably. It was very obvious there were some things that AR does extremely well, that the Colts were just lacking their offense, specifically pushing the ball down the field vertically. But yeah, that's like the big question. I mean, I wish that I could give you a yes or no, because obviously I'd like to say yes. But I don't know, man. Like, I'm hoping that this was kind of the wake-up call that he needed. And obviously AR doesn't feel like he needs to change up his style or anything like that. So that is a little bit scary. I always am a little bit weary, no matter who the quarterback is, with those kind of scrambling quarterbacks, just because, we see it all the time. Like, Lamar's been banged up before. We've seen it with so many other running quarterbacks, it feels like. So I'm hoping that while that they don't completely eliminate that, I'm hoping that that's not always his first instinct. I'm hoping the pocket, in the pocket or outside the pocket, those sorts of things, where he's not getting the chance of, taking, even if it's not like a big hit, like having those hits add up, right? Like, I don't think the one that ended his season, it wasn't this massive like hit. It was just the wrong place at the wrong time.
Right.
And so I'm just hoping for however he does it, he minimizes as much as possible any sort of chance that he could get, really tackled at all. So that's the big question, man. I really hope he can.
I've been the biggest naysayer of Anthony Richardson right out the gate because of the injury history, but I have to admit that I was wrong about one thing. He was a lot more accurate down the field than what I gave him credit for coming out of college. So if he can stay healthy, we might have something here. But to your point, when he was on the sidelines, especially during that Cleveland game when it was super close, I think we ended up losing by 1 point. It was like 37-38 or 38-39 or something like that. It was a super close game. You could see it in his eyes, like he wanted to be on the field so bad. So hopefully you're onto something there for sure. Um, Speaking of onto something, like let's talk about this coaching staff for a little bit. Like I feel like given the fact that it was a big hit at that quarterback position with that injury, we were still a half a game out from making the playoffs last season. I feel like they've made the right moves in that coaching staff. Personally, I'm pretty optimistic. Am I missing something with Shane Steichen in this offense? Is there something that I mean, obviously, we all could work on something at all times. But is there something in particular that you would like to see the coaching staff work on over this offseason, and hopefully they come back in September and they take a step up themselves?
Yeah, I mean, it was so hard to gauge, right? Because you talked about it, backup quarterback for a good chunk of the season. Jonathan Taylor didn't see the field a whole lot. When
Mhm.
he did, he was very effective, but he had two different times during the season when he didn't play. Either it was the ankle / holdout, all that stuff, and then obviously the thumb that happened. I believe it was.
Mhm.
I don't remember which game that was. It was mid-season when that happened, and so I'm just looking forward to that. Like just having everybody back healthy together in the offseason. And another guy, Jelani Woods, that didn't play at all last year. So you were down three guys that really could help you out,
Yeah.
especially when it comes to the big plays. And so as far as the coaching staff goes, I mean, offensively, I think they did about as good a job as they probably could have given the circumstances. I think what I would like to see from probably more the defensive side of things is obviously we know Colts one of the least blitzing teams in the NFL. I'd like to see them bring it up, make the defense a little bit more unpredictable at times because especially if you can't, we saw the Colts at times, they only rush four, right? And while I do hope that Latu can be that guy, I would like to see them kind of be a little bit more complex in the way that they, go after offenses. I'd like to see the equivalent of what the Colts do offensively on the defensive side of the ball. While I understand there's a benefit of the simplicity of it, there's also a drawback of that as well. And so I'm hoping that they kind of tweak a few things, Gus Bradley and all those guys, and obviously hoping that Charlie Partridge, his arrival, can really start to get some more out of these defensive linemen. It's crazy to say, but like for how this defensive line, they broke the franchise record in sacks, but it really still wasn't good enough, which is crazy to even say that. I know, but like the consistency on a week in and week out basis, it just wasn't there at times. And so I'm hoping that the addition of Partridge and maybe some tweaks defensively can hopefully help this defense out. And it felt like sometimes the Colts just they made the it's kind of weird because like they do everything right and then they just make some big catastrophic mistake. Like I can't tell you how many times it was like 3rd and long and they'd allow a completion down the field and I'm like, what are we doing, man? Like that kind of stuff, some of the mental errors and stuff. And so so I guess I'm just hoping that some of that stuff, some of those tweaks on the defensive side of things can kind of start to match what the offense does and kind of the mismatches that they bring about just with their scheme and how they like to attack defenses down the field. So that's what I would say. More defense than offense in terms of different tweaks and stuff.
No, and honestly, I usually ask a defensive question, but I'm right there with you. Yeah, according to PFN has the Colts listed as the 23rd ranked defense headed into 2024, and honestly, I don't think that that's a completely unfair ranking. I mean, somebody's got to be in the bottom third, and they did make some moves. So the only defensive question I really want to ask you, since we're on the defense right now, is Latu, the first round draft pick for the Colts. So again, I was a little skeptic about the Anthony Richardson thing because of the injury history. I was a little skeptic about the Latu pick because of the neck injury history. Have you seen anything coming out of these early camps, rookie camps, or anything like that that would suggest that it's in his past, he's completely over it, and I should just quit stressing about it and accept the fact that he's going to be the Latu they think he's going to be.
Yeah, and I understand, like, look at it, you're like, oh gosh, like forced to medically retire, like that's terrifying, right? That's a terrifying thing.
Yeah.
I guess I would say this, like, this has kind of been my argument on why, why the Colts kind of came to their decision is like, it was what, like 2-3 years ago, but when that happened or something like that from the time he got drafted. It's been a bit, I know. And then
it was during the COVID shortened season, so it was only 4 games. So
right, and so I kind of look at that and I say, okay, that was a while ago. He's played 2 full seasons. He's also played rugby in that time after all that happened. And the Colts are a team, man, that I've noticed this. They've done this before where they medically have red flagged a few players. If you remember in 2019, I think they did that with Montez Sweat. And they medically and they passed on him and they traded out of the first round and they got Rock. Now, obviously, hindsight, you're like, dang, I wish they would have got him. But so it makes me think the Colts are a team that definitely do their homework. Like they're not just like, oh, we're just going to take a risk on anybody. Not that teams do that, but I feel like the Colts are one of the more very like cautious teams when it comes to that. So that kind of made me feel a little bit better. And just hearing from different people, his coach, and all that stuff. It makes me feel like that stuff is all in the past, and it's not like Latu's ever had any issues, after that, like even in college, like he played, I think every single game the last 2 years and not just played, but played at an extremely high level. So against some really good competition. So I guess for me, that makes me feel a little bit better. I've honestly kind of not forgotten about that, but like I haven't, nothing to me has indicated that that's anything that's an issue, at least right now for a while. So I'm hoping that that's good news, but yeah haven't really heard anything after the draft, when it comes to that. So
if you feel good about it, then I feel good about it. How about that? So,
hey,
so
man, you
again,
know what? I just learned with the Colts, like I'm just gonna let it play out because you try to guess and we've been burned before, so I'm just gonna let it play out, man.
So higher risk again. So again, high risk but high reward. So Anthony Richardson, high risk, potentially real high reward. Latu, maybe not as much of a risk as I had anticipated, but potential for high reward. What about that second round pick with the diabetes? We got Adonai Mitchell, Adonai Mitchell, AD Mitchell. We've got Mitchell in the second round with the diabetes issues. There were times where he was completely lethargic on the field and he completely went away in college. And I kind of wondered why. I had no idea that he even had diabetes until just before the draft. And then I'm thinking, okay, surely the Colts aren't going to take this kind of risk. And then they do. But again, if it works out, like such potential there. So in that wide receiving core, we've got Michael Pittman, we've got Josh Downs. And if he's balanced, we've got Adonai Mitchell. Now Alec Pierce suddenly becomes your wide receiver 4, where we were hoping just a year ago that he would kind of progress and develop into that wide receiver 3. This is a pretty solid wide receiving core. Am I right?
Yeah, it is. And the crazy thing is Alec Pierce, I don't know if you know this or not, but he played the most snaps out of any wide receiver on the Colts last year. He logged over 1,000 snaps last year. So it's kind of crazy that, like, I've heard a little bit from OTAs. He's been playing special teams. Like, he's done a little special teams, which is just bizarre to think about that. Like, going from the most snaps of any receiver on the team to potentially playing some special teams. That's crazy to me. But yeah, man, when it comes to the wide receiver room, the thing I like about this room is I think you have a little bit of everything. Like, you have obviously Michael Pittman, who's your possession guy. He's never going to be the crazy yak guy or the although he can do that stuff. He's never going to be, Justin Jefferson or whoever you want to throw into that category where, he's a very reliable guy, very solid, I think, wide receiver 1. But he's not like the crazy, some of those guys. So he's a very good receiver. We definitely love Michael Pittman. Glad that he's stuck around for the next 3 years. And it's funny, I got a little bit of pushback from people today that I don't think understood my context when I said, hey, man, the more that these guys, these wide receivers who are definitely better than Pittman, but the more that these guys start to get paid, I mean, the Pittman contract continues to look very good for the Colts because I think at the time it was like he was like 7th overall in terms of wide receivers. He's all the way down to 12th already. And there's even going to be more wide receivers in the coming years that are going to get more than him. So I could see easily, man, in a year's time, he's outside of the top 15. Like, that's how crazy it could be when it comes to Michael Pittman. And I think it was a great, it was a good market value for him, but I think it's going to look like a bargain in the next couple of years for the Colts. So you have Michael Pittman, who I think is, and also this is one thing I added to just like the Michael Pittman thing as well, is like, man, look at the quarterbacks he's played with. Like, he hasn't really had anywhere near what we would consider even like a Pro Bowl type of quarterback. I know Gardner Minshew was a Pro Bowl quarterback, but you know what I mean? Like, we haven't had even a top probably 10 quarterback that he's ever played with. I mean, Phillip Rivers would probably be the closest thing to that, but I don't know if we'd say he was a top 10 quarterback that year.
No.
And so, like, you know what I mean? So I'm like, I'm curious now with Anthony Richardson and another year in Shane Steichen's system, how much more can he do? Because he set a lot of career highs last year when it came to that, and he was playing with the backup quarterback for a good chunk of the year. So how much could Michael Pittman even take up his game, and how much of some of the stats you look at are kind of a product of just not playing with great quarterbacks in his career? So I'm intrigued with that to see what more Michael Pittman potentially can provide here. And then you talked about, obviously, Adonai Mitchell. The interesting note that I think I saw on him was that I think, obviously with diabetes and all that stuff, like, you got to always be managing that. And I think he has like a personal chef now or something. So hopefully that kind of helps even him out a little bit more. I think that's the great thing about his situation that he's in with the Colts, is obviously he has Reggie Wayne as a coach. He's got some good support system around him now. Some guys. Yeah, exactly. So he's got some good support system around him that I think guys that can help keep him in check, when it matters. So I think that's definitely a great situation for Adonai Mitchell, and one of the better situations he could go to, honestly. And then you talked about Josh Downs. We know what he can do as out of the slot. And then you got, obviously Alec Pierce, who, a guy that definitely, when you look at the stats, you're like, oh, it's kind of a disappointing year too. And he's by no means a complete receiver. He's definitely kind of a one-trick pony. He's a vertical threat, but man, I'm intrigued to see now if AR can stay healthy, what they can, potentially factor up down the field, because we saw Pierce at times, the Tennessee game, the Rams game, make some clutch plays. So while I don't necessarily think he's going to log over 1,000 snaps this year, I think he still will have a role in this offense. So kind of just different guys with some different skill sets. I know kind of Mitchell and Pierce are more similar than the other guys, but yeah, man, I'm very intrigued with this wide receiver room. And then you got a couple other guys like Ashton Doolin, who is coming back. Yeah, obviously, he missed the whole year last year. Kind of forget about him, but he's a very good special teams player. And then you got Anthony Gold as well, which I'm very intrigued about Anthony Gold, because he's going to be primarily probably your return guy. But, I mean, the dude is very athletic himself. I mean, he definitely did some really, really good things in his college career. So he's kind of a wild card for me. Like, could he potentially factor in a couple snaps per game or something? I don't know. But yeah, it definitely on paper, I would say the best receiving core, probably in the Chris Ballard era, to be honest with you. That's how good I believe it is right now. And I do think it's talking about the support around Anthony Richardson. I think it's a pretty good young support that can grow together with him.
I think you just mentioned the most polarizing person on this team when it comes to support or no support. Are you pro Chris Ballard at this point?
Oh, that's a tough question. I would say for me, I'm kind of in the middle right now when it comes to Chris Ballard. Like, I do disagree in a lot of ways with his free agency approach and how he goes about it. But it's kind of funny. It seems like I can find myself being kind of out on him more in free agency, and when the draft comes around, I'm like, all right, I guess I feel a little bit better now. So if I was in this, I feel like I'd been pounding the table for a pass rusher for like 4 or 5 years, like a legit pass rusher. Like, you took Kwity Paye, but he was never a high sack guy, and you took all these athletic guys, but they never produce, or consistently produce, that is. So I was kind of like, if he's going to continue to kind of put his head in the sand when it comes to pass rush, I'm kind of starting to get out on him if he doesn't do something here soon, because there's a lot of edge rushers in free agency that he could have gone after, didn't do anything there. So I was kind of like, man, if we're just going to continue to have this, in certain ways, mediocre pass rush when it comes to pressure rate, then I'm starting to get to that point. But, he definitely helped himself out to me with just how he approached the draft, because I definitely felt like it was one that, I don't think his seat's necessarily hot, but I do think it's not as low of, whatever happens this year happens for him like last year, I think. There are expectations now, and the team's definitely got to live up to it. And obviously you spoke like you felt like this team's in a really good place. You brought back virtually every starter last year. So, yeah, I mean, I think the expectations are high, and they have to be high for Chris Ballard. So we'll see on this year. And obviously we talked about, a lot of health for a lot of different players. That's contingent on it. But, yeah, I'm kind of right in the middle when it comes to Chris Ballard. I could take it or leave it, to be honest.
I was so down on Anthony Richardson that it kind of hurt me last season whenever they went AR with that fourth pick, because Ballard had a history of trading down in the first round more so than staying set or trading up, and so I was actually really hoping that they would have traded back from that fourth and got a lot of other pieces and maybe target one of these quarterbacks this season, that this offseason, that was obviously there were a lot of them, a lot of good ones, but. So that's when I started my kind of speculation, but I was very high on Ballard when he came here, especially after his time in Kansas City. So, but yeah, kind of right there in the middle with you. We got to kind of wait and see one more season, I think, but I don't know that I'm going to be too patient after one more season if it doesn't start to turn around. But for sure, definitely agree with you on the free agent part. Like it just seems insane to me. Um, I know I'm kind of jumping around here, but I just kind of keep spilling right into what you're leading me into. But I do want to go back to the running backs real quick. Obviously, JT is the man. If he's healthy, he's a 3-down back. He's our all world running back. Behind him, so Trey Sermon, kind of highly touted coming out of college for a lot of people, especially my co-host here on Toilets and Titles, Evan Hall out of Northwestern, fifth round pick last season. So definitely not big name people behind Jonathan Taylor, not really well known people behind Jonathan Taylor, and kind of in Trey Sermon's case, somebody that was kind of given up on from his time in San Francisco. Obviously, we don't want JT to go down, but we've seen it and we know it can happen, especially with running backs. So if he misses any time at all, who's stepping up? Who's that next guy up? And do we have any confidence in them?
Yeah, and this is a position I probably wouldn't mind a veteran addition of some sort. There's a couple guys out there that I'm like, I wouldn't mind that, just adding to that backup running back position. But I think for me, if I'm choosing probably a front runner for that next guy up, it'd probably be Trey Sermon to me, just because I felt like he ran well last year when given opportunities with the Colts, and I felt like he did some really nice things, like he talked about. He was pretty highly touted. I think he was a 3rd round pick coming out of Ohio State a few years ago. So, I mean, the dude has talent, unquestionably, no doubt about it. So I probably would say Trey Sermon for me, but Evan Hall I'm very intrigued about as well, just because we didn't see him hardly at all. We saw him in the preseason, but this is a dude that caught a ton of balls at Northwestern, and I think he could provide a different element to this offense that I think was lacking last year. And I don't think he's obviously going to be probably Nyheim Hines type, but he could be. But he's a guy that definitely had a lot of volume when it came to the receptions. I think he had a game in Northwestern where he had over 200 yards receiving. So this dude can definitely do that. We just didn't really see them utilize him much last year in the preseason, because obviously it's a preseason, but also just the fact that he was hurt. So those are two guys that I'm really intrigued about. And then obviously you have Tyler Goodson, who everybody will remember for the drop. But I think he did some nice things last year when given different opportunities in certain roles. And so, but I would say if I'm picking between the three, probably Trey Sermon for me. He's proven a little bit more to me that he could be more consistent out there. And we saw him in a couple different games start to really, kind of turn it up a little bit. And to your point, man, about forgotten players. Hey, they just let go. I just had a guy last year who filled in that was a forgotten player in Buffalo. So feels like they find those guys somehow, and they're able to get some stuff out of them. So I'm hoping Trey Sermon could be the next kind of Zach Moss story.
Yeah, my co-host John will be happy to hear that. But So just to throw it out there, we don't have to talk about these guys, but you mentioned it. Free agents that are currently alive right now, still looking for jobs. Dalvin Cook, who knows what he might still have left in the tank. Cam Akers had a really hot flash in the pan there for a little bit. Kareem Hunt, should that injury not be too much of an issue. Matt Breida, Jerick McKinnon. We know he can catch the ball out of the backfield. Melvin Gordon-ish, maybe. So, I mean, there are definitely still some names that could fill in greatly for just, maybe to spell Taylor for a series from time to time or something. So, yeah, I agree with you. I'd love to see that happen. All right, the tight end position. Another guy that you mentioned earlier, a guy that we missed for a chunk of time last season, Jelani Woods, is back. I make the joke all the time about the Colts tight ends on the show and how the Colts don't really have a tight end one, but we have 4 tight end twos that are all pretty serviceable. But is there one that's going to stand out and be the guy this year, or are we just kind of going to continue to see that revolving door? Jelani Woods, Kylan Granson, Mo Alley Cox, and Will Mallory are the 4, obviously, that I'm talking about.
I think if anybody has a chance, it's definitely Jelani Woods. The dude, despite the fact that the Colts had probably one of the worst passing offenses you'll see in 2022, Jelani Woods was a guy that when he was targeted, good things happened, man. I mean, you point to that Kansas City game early in the season. He had 2 touchdowns, the game winner. And then a little bit later on in the season, that Pittsburgh game, I think he almost had 100 yards receiving. So Jelani, I mean, out of all the tight ends, I mean, clearly the most athletic and gifted guy. I mean, 6'7", 255 or something like that, but he's athletic as can be. He's not like Mo Alley Cox where he looks a little like he's not as athletic. He's just a big guy, Jelani's got a little bit more to him. I think it was 10 out of 10 RAS score, so one of the more athletic guys we've seen. I think he definitely has a chance here. And the crazy thing is, man, he said he feels even more explosive than he did his rookie season, which is crazy considering, the hamstrings he dealt with. So I'm hoping that that's the truth because we have not seen a single snap of Jelani Woods and Shane Steichen's offense. So that is very interesting to me. And the other tight ends, you're kind of right. It's just a lot of like tight end twos. Like there's not a whole lot. I think if anybody of those guys that you mentioned between Mo, Will Mallory, and Ogletree probably, and Granson, I guess too, if any of those guys probably stand out to me. I liked what I saw from Will Mallory last year in spurts. They didn't really target him a whole lot, but when they did, I felt like he made some key first downs for them. He was the fastest tight end out of the draft last year, so he's got that speed factor, which is definitely good, and he's pretty athletic himself. So I think if I was choosing, those 2 guys probably for me have the most upside. I feel like we kind of know what Kylan Granson is at this point. He's solid, but nothing spectacular. Ogletree, I don't really know what he is right now. And then obviously Mo Alley Cox, which kind of wonder why he's still on the roster at this point. I mean, he's just big and he can block. That's about it. But yeah, I think if I'm choosing the 2, it's probably Will Mallory and Jelani Woods to me. I think they both have the most upside and at least have shown a little bit more for me that they can do some stuff when they're targeted.
Yeah, it definitely sounds more like a law firm, the law firm of Granson, Mallory, and Ogletree. But all right, offensive line. We'll just do the offensive line kind of as a whole. Again, I like to refer to Pro Football Network when I talk about these. So when I say these stats, that's who I'm referring to. We can give them credit for the work here, but they have the Colts offensive line ranked as their 6th best offensive line heading into 2024. That is after the addition of the offensive tackle in the 3rd round and the center in the 4th round that the Colts brought on. So because they don't just figure the starting offensive line, they also figure in the backups. So 6th overall is pretty solid. It's a pretty good ranking. Overall, as a starting 5, just kind of give people a rundown of what you expect to see with that offensive line this season.
Yeah, talk about a resurgence for 2022. I mean, this is probably the most improved unit out of anyone, to be honest with you. Yeah. In 2022, it looked like they didn't care, and it looked like they got better as the season went on. But at the beginning, it was rough, man. It was rough with Matt Pryor at left tackle. That was a whole experience. And then Bernard Ryman basically kind of getting thrown in there his rookie season and kind of having to just, go from there and learn on the fly. But I think that definitely helped him out, man, because year 2 he took a big leap, and I thought he was a really good left tackle. And I think his emergence, and then Braden Smith when he was on the field, it made them one of the top tackle duos in the NFL, and that's definitely exciting. And it's interesting now, man. I'll get to this in a second, but like I feel like the Colts kind of have kind of this game plan, this roadmap, if you will, of how they like go after offensive linemen, especially a little bit later, because they go after very athletic guys, but they get guys that are a little bit undersized in terms of their strength. They're not the strongest guys. They're like, hey, give them a year in our strength and nutrition and all that stuff. We'll get them bulked up 10 to 15 pounds and they'll be ready to go. That's what they did with Ryman. I believe that's what's going to be probably happening with Blake Freeland, the backup right tackle, because he was very athletic, but a little bit undersized, probably could get a little bit stronger. And then obviously another guy we'll talk about in a second here in the 4th round. You talked about him, but Quentin Nelson, I mean, speaks for himself. One of the best, if not the best guards in all of football. He's been a consistent all-pro. I mean, what else can you say about the guy? It's like, he's a good player when, different people are like gloating from opposing fan bases about one play where their defensive lineman beat him, or maybe even made him move a little bit. It's like, all right, like show me the other 100 snaps in the game and let's talk then, or whatever.
Right.
So it's just funny, but obviously Quentin Nelson, he's been as advertised, and great to see him kind of make a rebound as with everybody last year, kind of get back to that dominant form that we're used to. Ryan Kelly's interesting to me because I believe he's in a contract year this year. And he definitely had a bounce back. I think if anybody on this offensive line had a bounce back, it was probably Ryan Kelly had the biggest one. I mean, it was just very disappointing in 2022. I mean, we know how much, all that stuff that happened with him and his wife and all that stuff, like just affected him mentally. I believe he was down to like 280 at one point. Like he lost a ton of weight, and it just was obvious that it was impacting him. So it was great to see him make that comeback. The only concern I have about Ryan Kelly is the concussions. He had 2 concussions last year, and that for me is a little bit concerning. Like how much longer is he going to play? And he was asked about that, and he's pretty adamant he's going to continue to keep playing. So we'll see on that. But yeah, Ryan Kelly, a little bit older. I think the oldest, probably the longest tenured, one of the longest tenured players on this team at this point. He's getting up there in age, but yeah, he's been very consistent when on the field. One of the better centers in the NFL last year. And the right side's where it gets a little bit interesting with Will Fries, a right guard last year. I wonder if he's going to have some competition this year because the Colts added 2 guys in the draft. They added Matt Gonzalez in the 3rd round, like you mentioned, and then Tanner Bortolini in the 4th round. While Bortolini is listed as center, he's also played some guard. And Gonzalez, while he's listed as tackle, he actually, like, athletically is better fit as a guard. So I'm curious, like, how does that go about? Are those guys strictly those 2 positions, or do they kind of compete for that right guard position? Because that's kind of the one I don't entirely know. But, I definitely think Will Fries is not like he's just going to get handed a starting right guard spot this year. I think there's going to be some serious competition in there. And if he earns it, he earns it. But I think it's not like a situation where it's kind of like, well, we don't have anybody else, so here you go. And then right tackle, Braden Smith. I mean, it sounds like he had successful knee surgery. He kind of dealt with some injuries last year. Now, traditionally, he's been actually pretty good with the health stuff. It just felt like last year it was just like this nagging thing. So I'm hoping that he gets back because, like I said earlier, he's one of the best right tackles in football when he's actually healthy and on the field. He definitely helped out the Colts when he was on the field last year. And then I talked about Blake Freeland as well, who had to fill in a lot and, struggled, but I think he's going to get better. It feels like just with a year in the program and bulking up a little bit, getting a little bit stronger, he can potentially kind of slide in there if need be at right tackle. And then a couple other guys that you have, Danny Pinter, you brought back. He got injured, I think, pretty early on. And then Wesley French. So those guys will probably be competing for that backup center position with Tanner Bortolini. So I'll be interested to see that. But from a depth standpoint, this is probably one of the deepest offensive lines we've seen the Colts have in a while because not only do they have a lot of guys, but they have a lot of guys who can play multiple positions, which I think is very, very important.
And now young guys that can learn from the vets. So You never know when they're going to need to be called up. And also, like, those are third and fourth round picks. And for offensive line, especially the center guard area, those are still pretty important picks. So
Mhm.
obviously the Colts think pretty highly of them, more so than just, "Yeah, I'm going to draft you." Like they spent
Yeah.
a decent amount of draft capital on them. So that makes me feel good as well. All right, I'm going to ask you one more question, my man. And this is in honor of my co-host for these shows, George, who typically helps me out with these shows. He had to miss last season, and I believe I forgot to ask you this question, so this is perfect. The last question he likes to ask all of our guests, as a Colts fan, take quarterback out of the equation, because if after I ask this question, everybody just says Pat Mahomes if we don't. So take quarterback out of the equation. If you could take any player from any
Mm.
other NFL team, I mean, salary cap be damned, nothing matters. Like, it's not a trade. You're the magical wizard, and you get to pluck them off of that team and put them on the Colts. Who would that one player be, and why?
Oh man, this is a good one. See, I'm a big believer in pass rush, so like I'm tempted to go like one of those top guys, like Miles Garrett or somebody like that.
Mhm,
But also, I'm looking at the Colts for needs, and I'm like, oh man, a good shutdown corner wouldn't hurt either.
mhm.
Oh, well, just based off of my principle, I'll say Miles Garrett. I mean, I think he's just unbelievable, unbelievable.
There you go. I like it, and that's why George likes to ask the questions. He likes to see where our guests find to be the biggest holes or the biggest weaknesses. You kind of talked about both of them. Like, the biggest hole is that shutdown corner position. So it'd be nice to maybe get a Sauce Gardner, but Sauce
Yeah,
Gardner is going to do a lot more damage if that front line can get to the quarterback. So it
right.
definitely starts in the trenches. So I'm with you on that one as well. So that yeah, definitely would be wonderful. But yeah, man. Hey, Cody, I appreciate you coming on again, guys. Again, down there at the bottom, that's at CP Felger 55 on all the socials, and reach out to him. What's your next piece of work that you're working on right now?
Yeah, so I guess we just looked at Pat McAfee. He had Anthony Richardson on today on his show. I don't know if you checked that out or not, but we were kind of reacting to that. But we're going to be starting here probably either later this week or next week. We always do this every year during the summer, kind of during our off period. We look and do a deep dive into each and every position on the Colts. So we'll start at quarterback, work all our way down through the offense, go to the defense, and then end on special teams. So typically that's like 11 or 12 episodes. So it's a pretty big series for us. We've done it, I think, ever since we kind of started. So like 2019, we've done it every single year, and I always enjoy it. It's one of my
Nice.
favorite series we do. So that's kind of the big project coming up, and then here in a couple months we got training camp, so we're really looking forward to that this year. And it was a great time last year, and we're really hoping that we can get some more opportunities to talk to some players and all that good stuff.
You all heard that. They even do a breakdown of the special teams. I love it when there's somebody else on the team that actually, or somebody else that comes on the show that actually gives respect to kickers. So
Yeah.
that's awesome. All right. Well, again, hey, that's Toilets of Titles, guys. We appreciate you guys tuning in. We appreciate you watching our Colts breakdown. Don't forget to go back and check out all the other breakdowns that we've been doing this off season. I think we're like 12 in right now. Also, patreon.com/toilets of titles. Make sure you show that love and support. We greatly appreciate all of you for tuning in. Have a great evening.